I'm mindful that at this stage in the afternoon, being light and a bit exciting is a good thing. So I want you to imagine something. Take a moment, cast your mind to sort of a better, brighter future. Imagine a world of self-repairing roads that can self-heal or repair potholes by itself. Imagine a world of bridges that can last for 500 years rather than 50 years. Is this even possible? Could you even want this to happen? But if you can, you would imagine a world of infrastructure, of productivity gains, of people being able to travel around. But unfortunately, the construction industry hasn't had a lot of innovation for about 20 years. Could this be about to change? So I want Howard here from HS2 to talk a little bit about HS2, bearing in mind that 3/4 of the audience aren't from the UK. They won't have a clue what it stands for. And then explain a little bit about your approach to acceleration.
Thank you, James. I mean, you really set me up there to try. I need to solve a lot of problems. But so HS2 is the largest infrastructure project in Europe at the moment. It is the first greenfield high-speed railway line that's been built first greenfield railway line full stop that has been built in over 100 years. So to put that into context, you have well over 100 miles of new rail going in between London, Birmingham, and then further north towards Manchester. And then you have multiple new railway stations being built on top of that are the size of sort of almost airports. So very, very significant investments. And that major infrastructure project has a degree of its own gravity. And that gravity is not only a huge project, but something that is becoming increasingly a massive test bed for innovation. Because we have a relatively ring-fenced environment in which we can actually drive some of these productivity improvements, green, new technology, carbon and safety improvements within a very big but still ring-fenced project. What we have started to see, certainly in the last three years that I've been with the program, is it's a very complicated industry that is dominated heavily by some large organizations, but the startup economy is starting to disrupt construction significantly. And as the client, we have to embrace that. And it's really important that we start to embrace that. Because of the integrated nature of the construction environment, where you not only have major blue chip construction partners, but actually joint ventures, for startup organizations to be successful, they have to fight all the way up through a very complicated supply chain. And unless we as the client actually start to work with them directly, they don't really often get the opportunity to scale at speed. So what we have started to do actually is embrace those relationships with startup organizations. We've built an accelerator environment where we work on very specific challenges. And then we not only coach those organizations, we teach them about how major infrastructure procures things, but we bring revenue opportunities, and the revenue opportunities are a massive differentiating factor for those people in our accelerator. What we are now investigating is a new tool off the back of that, where we actually start to investigate with our supply chain whether equity-backed opportunities would actually even accelerate that even further. And so that's why, that the original hybrid fund concept is coming to the fore. And just to put that into context, we can scale things very, very quickly in comparison to those organizations being left on their own. And my final point before I stop waffling is, to put that into context, we started working with a 4 to 5 person startup maybe 3.5 years ago that is looking at AI in terms of planning and construction risk management. That organization has in the last 3 years now scaled to be working across 7 to 8 of our contracts, and we are also working with them internally. They've just closed a 100 million round, and they now have a standing organisation of just over 100 people in probably 28 months. And so that's the scale that we can bring. Is venture an opportunity for us to use the gravity of something like a major infrastructure to also coach the supply chain to invest in their own future?
Really exciting. That sort of hybrid approach to thinking of scale, the approach to actually taking equity potentially alongside of getting these companies up to us. It's a really exciting approach. So for Modwenna, from your point of view, you've obviously got a sort of really interesting background that's enabled you to look at the venture ecosystem in perhaps a new and fresher light as well. So perhaps you want to give a little bit of your sort of context and background and how you've deconstructed things, because again, I think there's a lot to be learned and opportunities created in this.
So I'll just start where I started, which is I met the former deputy CEO of Standard Chartered Bank. We had one of those lovely meetings where you suddenly make friends in 5 seconds. Have you ever had business meetings like that? They're really great. And we
Well,
broadly
that's how we met, wasn't it?
Well, that's how we met.
And how we met in a
yes.
coffee shop.
How we all meet, isn't it, surely? Yes. Anyway, so, and basically, if you think about financial services, are part of the financial services world, innovation, disruption. Yes, we've got better at more people doing it, but most people are still doing it sort of the same. It's sometimes quite inefficient. Do we feel it all quite inefficient, actually getting a deal done? Takes forever, quite complicated, all the interest groups. Anyway, Mike and I sat there going, let's have a dream, let's disrupt, deconstruct, change, all the things that you're talking about in your world. We're like, perhaps we could do it in our world and make it a lot better for everybody. So we set out on this journey, and we realised pretty quickly we had to do some big changes to make it worth it. So we're after 80% greater efficiency, half the cost at least, So let's change the world. Let's make it really easy. Let's make it have a dream where we could close an investment in 4 weeks rather than 6 or 9 months. How do we do that? Because it's only by asking yourself the question, do you find the solution? And we're most of the way now to solving all this. We've been in super stealth mode for 4 years, which is quite fun in itself. So if you look at me publicly, you won't really find anything about this, so don't tell anyone yet. Anyway, so, and what we're finding is it can be done if you deconstruct, if you actually look into every little bit and start saying, why is it working like this? Can it work better? I'm not an engineer. I'm a history graduate from the city, which does that make me useful for anything? Be your judgment. No. But actually, if you start applying lean engineering type approaches, all these sorts of strategies that for you guys, you'll be like, yeah, obviously. In the financial services, not obvious. We're applying for ISO 9001 right now. And they're saying, but we've not really done financial services companies before. You're like, well, here we are. Please help us. So what we're doing, one example, so you understand, because this is an end-to-end, everywhere, 360 approach. Imagine a world where you've got a portfolio company, and at the moment, you're an investor, and you want to monitor it. And you're probably relying on accounts being sent over and maybe a board meeting. It's probably pretty retrospective. Is it easy to predict what might go wrong? Imagine a world where you had an API into the management accounting system, which with the consent of people, we're not saying we're trying to take over and run your life, but just actually, we'd like to be able to call it, with you, perhaps, with your consent. I'm not saying just whenever. But if something major is about to go on, about to spend a large chunk of money, of the investment monies on some project, actually, we would quite like to call that every day or every week and see what's going on. Imagine how that changes the world. Also what it does to the desire and need for trust between the two in order to help that happen. But actually, imagine that working well. So that's one of the things we've done. Create that.
That's exactly perfect. Now, final minute each from you both. Howard, you described a little bit about one of your portfolio companies creating revenue, being valued, raising 100 million in its latest round. But what about the impact on HS2 of working with these companies? What about the cost savings? I remember that you've been able to create a bit there. Is there any sort of scale of the impact you've had on HS2 already, bearing in mind where we are in the project?
Yeah, so via a number of these startup companies, last year we managed to reduce the overall cost by £226 million. So that's just through working with these startups.
Just from working from the startups,
Yeah.
saving the project. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So well done. And then Modwenna, very briefly, again, think of final minutes. If you're thinking about the sort of, the deconstruction piece, doesn't it all hinge in a certain way on having accurate valuations to then be able to think through what a capital structure? How would you start to deconstruct what that would look like in some shape or form?
Okay, I'll try and do this in 60 seconds. All right,
Or less.
valuations. Firstly, not an art, not a science, not a black box, right? You can do it, all right? Because you can value a paper bag, frankly, can't you? I don't know how many of you would pay for it, but somebody might.
1 pence.
1 pence, exactly. You can value anything. You can value a management team, you can value IP, you can value, honestly, you really can. You have to understand the framework you use, you have to understand the use case, really critical. Vast difference between high-risk VC investing valuations, when we're all speculating on amazing results, and what the UK taxman says, a prudent investor in an open market with a willing buyer and a willing seller, which I interpret coming from Somerset as popping down the Wells market on a Saturday with my share certificate saying, does anyone want to buy it or not? Which I think we probably know what the answer might be. So, actually what valuations are is mathematics, because we have numbers, whether it's forecasts, whatever. We can do the sums, we can do the comparables. Those of you who know it, that's easy, relatively. Then you have, after numbers, you have arguments. And arguments are, what is missing from those numbers that you can't sort of see in the numbers? A classic would be IP. So IP on a balance sheet might have the cost of the IP, creating it, but not properly be interpreting the full value. Management teams, again, I'm sure a lot of you are backing management teams. They are very valuable indeed, aren't they? But they're not on the balance sheet. Risks rather than opportunities. What about inflation? More bad news today on inflation in the UK. Irritating.
1.75.
Yeah. But things like challenges of hiring people. Most sets of forecasts I see from entrepreneurs and businesses is they factored in the sort of we need more people bit and it's going to cost more, but they possibly haven't factored in cost of headhunters or cost of delay in recruiting someone in January versus June, which on your spreadsheet looks like normal, but when you actually apply real world, suddenly it all looks different. So risks. So you have maths, arguments why it's higher, arguments why it's lower, net result. Job done?
Perfect. I can see why your son's just about to become a barrister. Perfect. Well, please join me in thanking Howard and Modwenna. That was really wonderful.